Back in 1848, San Francisco existed as a quiet little settlement known as Yerba Buena, home to about 200 folks. Just 2 years on, its population had skyrocketed to more than 25,000, marking one of the quickest urban booms ever recorded in history. Prospectors poured in from across the globe, all drawn by the lure of gold. In doing so, they laid the foundations for one of the nation's most remarkable urban centers. Thanks to AI technology, we can now virtually stroll through the streets of 19th century San Francisco. Picture the harbor in 1849, right after James Marshall's gold find at Sutter's Mill. Vessels streamed in every day from places like New York, China, Chile, Australia, and Europe, each brimming with eager treasure hunters. What's truly astonishing is how the sailors ditched their ships. Captains, crew members, and even travelers, all bolted for the gold fields once they arrived. As a result, hundreds of abandoned boats decayed right there in the bay. Clever business owners turned them into makeshift lodging, bars, storage spots, and even a jail. Even now, numerous vessels from the gold rush days lie buried under the financial district's towering buildings, their timber frames sealed beneath contemporary high-rises. Here's a glimpse of downtown San Francisco during the early 1850s. Hasty wooden structures erected in mere weeks, including some flimsy canvas setups disguised with wooden fronts to seem sturdier. Blazes raged frequently. Over the 18 months from 1849 to 1851, 6 devastating fires wiped out huge swaths of the city. Structures would go up in flames, only for fresh ones to sprout on the identical plots just days later. Real estate prices went through the roof. A parcel that fetched $16 in 1847 commanded over $45,000 by 1850. True wealth often came not from panning for gold, but from hawking tools like picks and shovels, along with shelters and provisions to the miners. Levi Strauss showed up in 1853 and struck it rich by offering tough canvas trousers suited for rough work. Institutions such as Wells Fargo sprang up to securely transport the precious metal. The big winners weren't the diggers themselves, but those who supplied them. Soon enough, San Francisco earned a reputation for its lively bars, betting dens, and performance venues. Imagine a bustling gambling spot in Portsmouth Square during the 1850s, the beating heart of gold rush society. No other U.S. city boasted as many taverns per person. Wagers were a constant. Faro, poker, roulette, you name it. Riches earned in the streams vanished at the gaming tables in no time. Amusements never let up. Stages hosted plays from Shakespearean classics to lively reviews. Admission fees were steep, yet prospectors, flush with recent hauls, forked over the cash without hesitation. Women were in short supply. By 1850, males vastly outnumbered females by almost 10 to 1. A lady strolling the avenue could attract a throng of suitors. Actresses and singers pulled in sky-high paychecks. This lopsided ratio bred an odd social atmosphere. Deep isolation, blended with wild camaraderie, brutality, alongside unexpected politeness. Into the 1850s, San Francisco's Chinatown had grown into the biggest Chinese enclave beyond Asia. Check out Sacramento Street in the 1860s, back when Chinese newcomers accounted for almost a fourth of the local populace. These arrivals chased what they called Gold Mountain, California. They toiled in claims forsaken by others, sometimes unearthing overlooked nuggets with great success. They constructed railways, laundries, and eateries. Yet prejudice hit them hard. Statutes barred them from court testimony, land ownership, or citizenship. Still, the neighborhood flourished. Pagodas, playhouses, academies, and clubs helped sustain Chinese traditions far from the homeland. Traversing those lanes, you'd catch whiffs of fragrant smoke, strains of Cantonese tunes, and displays of herbal remedies in storefronts. It formed a self-contained world, tied to the broader city, yet worlds apart in heritage. By the 1870s, San Francisco brimmed with riches, immense riches. Behold Nob Hill, where tycoons from mining and rails erected lavish estates to match Europe's finest or New York's grandeur. The mighty quartet, Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, Charles Crocker, and Collis Huntington, amassed their empires via the Transcontinental Railroad and settled on Nob Hill. Their homes screamed extravagance. Cable cars, debuting in 1873, finally opened up the hill. Prior to that, only the elite could spring for horse-drawn rides up those punishing inclines. The cable car itself stood as a homegrown San Francisco breakthrough. Engineer Andrew Hall, witnessing a horse tumble while hauling a tram uphill, resolved to devise something superior. But such opulence had a dark side. Consider the Comstock Lode in Nevada, the enormous silver deposit that padded the pockets of the city's upper crust while claiming countless miners' lives. Workers toiled in blistering heat over 120 degrees Fahrenheit, deep below the surface. Collapses, blasts, and poisonous fumes claimed lives all too often. Laborers received between $3 and $4 daily. Solid pay by the standards of that era. Yet the job ravaged their health. The lung disease silicosis, caused by breathing in pulverized stone, claimed lives gradually. The mine proprietors based in San Francisco seldom set foot at the operations that generated their riches. A similar dynamic played out in the workshops and factories of San Francisco. In tight basements, Chinese immigrants rolled cigars. In sweltering sweatshops, women stitched clothing. Kids toiled right beside grown-ups. The elegance and prosperity of the city depended on this unseen toil from those residing on Nob Hill. Come the 1880s, San Francisco had evolved into a proper urban center. Here, you see California Street, where cable cars ascend toward Nob Hill. Grand Victorian structures grace the avenues, marking a shift from its rough pioneer days. Throughout the 1880s and 1890s, the cable car network grew extensively. 8 firms ran routes all over town. Those vehicles posed real hazards. Operators required robust power and sharp instincts to manage the controls and stops. Now San Francisco boasted opera houses, galleries, green spaces, and institutions of higher learning. The cross-country rail line tied it to the eastern states. Ocean vessels bound it to Asian ports and Pacific islands. Residents numbered nearly 300,000. The place had endured blazes, tremors, financial crashes, and ethnic clashes. It felt solid, rooted, invincible. Then, on April 18, 1906, at 5:12 a.m., disaster struck. The quake endured only 42 seconds. Footage captures the instant ruin. Structures toppled, roads warped, gas lines burst and sparked flames. The jolt was ferocious, flattening whole edifices. City Hall, a $6 million project that spanned 2 decades, lay in ruins, exposing how crooked builders had stuffed cavities with debris rather than proper stonework. Roughly 700 perished in the shaking itself, but the ensuing blaze claimed thousands more. Flames raced unchecked. Aqueducts lay shattered, rendering fire crews powerless. The inferno raged for 3 days, gutting 80% of the urban area. More than 3,000 lost their lives overall. Some 250,000 individuals, over half the populace, faced displacement. The lavish homes atop Nob Hill went up in smoke. So did Chinatown and the business district. Even the Palace Hotel, billed as impervious to fire, succumbed. In a flash, the metropolis turned into a vast encampment for the displaced. Images depict Golden Gate Park jammed with canvas tents and hasty shanties, home to families for months as leaders debated reconstruction. Military forces handed out rations and essentials. Officials imposed military rule. Troops executed suspected thieves immediately, or anyone they labeled as such. Recovery efforts blended swift organization with harsh crackdowns. In mere weeks, parts of the water system came back online. Rebuilding kicked off within months. Astonishingly, the city didn't perish. In under 3 years, the bulk of San Francisco stood restored. By 1915, it staged an international exposition to flaunt its comeback. The pace of renewal echoed the frantic construction frenzy of the initial gold rush. Observe Market Street's revival. Fresh edifices emerging from debris, trams resuming service, a determined urban hub rejecting surrender. The reborn San Francisco featured steel skeletons and fortified cement. Insights from the quake informed these choices. Regulations for construction toughened. The new City Hall, finished in 1915, was engineered to endure shakes and, indeed, weathered the 1989 Loma Prieta event with slight harm. In 1933, construction started on a landmark span, the Golden Gate Bridge. Teams of designers and builders battled relentless Pacific gusts, thick mists and surging currents while securing enormous piers to the ocean floor. High over the waterway, workers teetered on slim girders, safeguarded by an early extensive safety mesh on the project. Mile-long cables, woven from countless steel strands, gradually formed between the pillars. Upon its 1937 debut, the span's vivid international orange hue pierced the haze and embodied daring contemporary engineering. Beyond linking San Francisco to Marin County, the Golden Gate Bridge endures as a testament to inventive spirit and resilience. Gazing back from this vantage at San Francisco's metamorphosis, from a settlement of 200 souls to a world hub in 2 years, from crude huts to opulent palaces in 50 years, from total devastation to revived powerhouse in 3 years, you grasp the blend of American hopefulness and American ferocity. The gold rush forged San Francisco in a whirlwind, spawning sudden fortunes and sudden destitution. It drew visionaries and outlaws, innovators and opportunists. Beauty and savagery arose intertwined. Such is the metropolis born of gold, unbowed by quakes, forever reshaping itself. If you've got another American city, time period, or pivotal event in history that you'd love to have revived, drop your suggestions in the comments. Thanks for tuning in.